Okay, imagine being a fly on the wall for a conversation between two of the most powerful leaders on the planet, right as the wheels of war are turning. That's exactly what we're looking at today. We are diving into this explainer to unpack an absolutely explosive piece of reporting about a leaked, highly charged phone call between US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a moment that really highlights both intense friction and, deeply entrenched alliances. As we walk through this, we're going to break down exactly what was said, the rapid military escalation that actually triggered the whole thing, and what it all means for a region that is literally teetering right on the brink.
According to reporting from Axios, the conversation behind closed doors was just absolutely blistering. I mean, the quoted language here is incredibly stark. The president was reportedly furious, allegedly telling Netanyahu, "You're effing crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me." And he followed it right up with, "I'm saving your ass. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this." It is incredibly rare, I mean truly rare, to see this level of raw, unfiltered tactical friction between allied leaders reported so publicly. What we're looking at is a US president forcefully stepping in to halt an allied military operation because of some really deep concerns about global optics.
But the public narrative, it quickly took a very different tone. During a later interview on a New York Post podcast, President Trump was asked point blank if he actually used that kind of explosive language. He did confirm they spoke and said he told him, "Bibi, we gotta stop this." But he totally downplayed the anger part. Instead of that raw fury we just talked about, Trump described his mood as just being, quote, "a little perturbed by the constant fighting with Lebanon." It's a fascinating pivot, right? He's acknowledging that he intervened, but he's significantly softening the edges of the conflict for the public eye.
Okay, let's dive into this flashpoint, the 48-hour escalation in Lebanon. Because to really understand how they reached this boiling point, we have to look at the reality on the ground. This call definitely did not happen in a vacuum.
Look at how rapidly this entire situation escalated. Over the weekend, the region saw some incredibly intense fighting in southern Lebanon. We're talking Israeli airstrikes, plus Hezbollah rockets and drones targeting Israeli soldiers and border communities. Fast forward to Monday, and Prime Minister Netanyahu officially orders the military to strike Daeh, which is a known Hezbollah stronghold suburb in South Beirut. But then, just hours after that order, and crucially right before those Beirut attacks could actually begin, the phone call happens, and the result? The Beirut strike gets pulled back. By Tuesday, an alternative, arguably less provocative airstrike hits the village of Kalaile instead. So you look at this rapid sequence of events, and it pretty much proves the call actually worked.
Now, with that immediate crisis in Beirut averted, we really have to look at how these two men, as wartime leaders, manage their relationship moving forward. What we're seeing unfold here is basically a masterclass in diverging tactics.
Trump tends to frame their dynamic through the lens of shared immense pressure. He's quoted saying, "I'm a wartime president, he's a wartime prime minister." So despite the reported swearing and the really intense pushback behind closed doors, Trump uses this framing to insist they still have a strong relationship. He's positioning them as two guys in the trenches together, navigating a massive, shared conflict. It's a way to contextualize that explosive phone call as just, a natural byproduct of wartime stress.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast in their public posturing. On one side, Trump's stance is visceral, it's frustrated, and it's heavily focused on global optics and public perception, that everybody hates Israel because of this angle. On the flip side, you have Netanyahu's reaction. He went on CNBC just hours later, and he was incredibly calm, incredibly diplomatic. He completely refused to get into the nitty-gritty of the call, basically brushing the friction off as mere tactical disagreements. He even used a familiar metaphor, saying these things happen in the best of families. It's a very calculated, smooth diplomatic pivot designed to make the alliance look entirely stable.
Netanyahu actually went a step further to minimize the friction over Lebanon with this exact quote, "We can disagree in the morning, and by the afternoon, we have a common action." This is classic political redirection right here. By pointing to a unified common action, Netanyahu is basically telling the world, and maybe even his own citizens, hey, don't get distracted by a canceled strike in Beirut because the true focus of our partnership is somewhere else entirely.
And so, what is that common action? Well, it's their overarching strategic alliance united against Iran. This is the gravitational pull that keeps the United States and Israel locked together. It completely overrides any morning disagreements over tactical strikes in Lebanon. For both of these leaders, finishing the issue of Iran's nuclear program is the absolute main objective. To truly grasp the weight of that objective, we need to break down the current, honestly highly murky status of the broader war with Iran. This specific conflict officially began on February 28th. Right now, President Trump is actively spruiking the progress of negotiations, claiming they're actually entering a final phase to formally end the war. Meanwhile, the leadership situation inside Iran is, well, highly unstable. Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, who replaced his father, was reportedly injured in strikes early on in the war. According to the reports we're seeing, he's currently in hiding and only contactable through messengers. Now, Trump has stated he'd be prepared to meet with Khamenei in the future, but the reality on the ground right now remains deeply, deeply fractured.
In navigating this final phase, Netanyahu is playing a very specific role. He has publicly deferred to the U.S. president on the future of these negotiations with Iran, saying it'll ultimately be up to Trump whether there's a return to fighting. But, and this is a big but, he accompanied that diplomatic deference with a really firm warning. Israel's military remains completely ready for whatever comes next. So he's basically stepping back to let the U.S. lead the diplomacy, while keeping his finger hovering right over the military button.
So the crucial point is that this dual reality, the intense tactical disagreements over Lebanon mixed with a totally unified strategic stance on Iran, it is having massive, immediate, real-world impacts. The geopolitical chessboard is literally being rearranged in real time based on these phone calls and constantly shifting red lines.
The immediate fallout from all this back and forth is stark. Because of Trump's intervention, the devastating planned strikes on that Hezbollah stronghold in South Beirut were pulled back. The Israeli military pivoted and executed an alternative strike on Kulele village instead. However, the broader conflict didn't just disappear, it simply relocated. Tehran has now ordered strikes on a U.S. base in Kuwait. So, the friction was managed for one day, but the violence just popped up somewhere else.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. With Tehran successfully ordering strikes in Kuwait and the red lines between Washington and Jerusalem constantly shifting under the immense pressure of wartime realities, can this incredibly fragile ceasefire actually hold? It's a high-stakes geopolitical drama, and honestly, the next 48 hours could be just as explosive as the last. You'll definitely want to keep your eyes on this space, because this story is far from over.